Good evening, everybody.
Go ahead.
Good evening, all. This is our public hearing on December 6th, 2022. And tonight's public hearing will be facilitated by our solicitor, Mr. Ward, serving as our hearing officer. Mr. Ward?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chairman. My name is Bill Ward. I'm an attorney at Rothman Gordon, and I am the solicitor and hearing officer for the Independent Pittsburgh Citizen Police Review Board. We are joined tonight by a panel consisting of Dr. Mary Jo Gershio, Mr. Raymond Robinson, and Ms. Kiki Brown. It's my understanding that over the past number of months, there have been reports of alleged conduct by members of the Pittsburgh Police Bureau that have risen to the level of being considered to be rude and discourteous. And rather than take them in a piecemeal fashion, the board, through discussions, public discussions, concluded that the better approach would be to hold a public hearing and to get a cross-section of the community who would report to the board their experiences with the City Bureau of Police with respect to allegations of rude and discourteous conduct. It is our approach tonight to have approximately half a dozen such citizens who will report to the board their allegations. At this time, I would turn to our executive director, Ms. Elizabeth Pittenger, to provide, for the context of the hearing, the efforts made with respect to notice and other procedural aspects. Ms. Pittenger.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you, Mr. Ward. I will note that Mr. Green has joined us, and for the record and for everyone's assurances, this public hearing has been posted on our website, cprbpgh.org, since early November, and it's been on the CPRB PGH Facebook page and advertised in print media, the city paper, on November 30th, the Post-Gazette November 24th, and in the Pittsburgh Courier on November 30th. The purpose of the hearing is to bring members of the community to the board to share their experience and their perspective on police conduct in the city of Pittsburgh. Many of these individuals report that they were offended by the officer's language, temper, perceived discourtesy, incivility, or a refusal to identify themselves. The board and staff recognize that police officers also enter an encounter with the pressures and tensions of community life, which undeniably influence an officer's demeanor at some time or another. The board will consider the mandatory participation in professional development activities designed to prepare and reinforce officers' awareness and competent humane responses to trauma-induced tensions under which many of us live. The community caretaking role of police demands different skills than does enforcement, though mastery of both is reflected in professionally competent policing. The board will convey to the chief of police and mayor an opinion on the public's perception of police conduct, with recommendations designed to improve the relationship between the Pittsburgh police and the community. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Ms. Pittenger. At this time, I will turn to Assistant Executive Director Stephanie Hampton, who will serve as my tip staff tonight with respect to marshaling the citizens who have registered in advance for this public hearing. Ms. Hampton, it's my understanding that you have a list of registered witnesses who wish to come forward and to provide their information. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Ward.
All right, Ms. Pittenger, is there any obligation to put these individuals under oath?
No, sir.
Sorry?
Actually, Mr. Ward, I think I would defer that to the board if they wish to have them under oath or if they just accept their commentary.
Colleagues?
I would be willing to accept their unsworn testimony.
Thank you, sir. Others?
I'm in support.
I guess considering the nature of the discussion of the cases, I would wonder why we would not want to have them under oath. but I would defer to the group as well, though.
All right, we'll proceed with unsworn testimony at this time to get a flavor and a cumulative impact of the collective testimony. This is not part of an individual's case that's advancing through the system, but for the purposes today, it would be an unsworn declaration. I should also note, for the purposes of people who are about to give their commentary, that this matter is being recorded and is also being presented live, I think, on YouTube, unless I'm mistaken. So they should be aware that their comments will be recorded. Ms. Hampton?
Yes. Our first resident is Armin. Armin, I'm going to allow you to speak, and you will have 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Thank you. This is Armin Samii. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Great. So I'll just go right ahead. My incident took place on October 5th. I was biking on Penn Avenue, and I was recording my bike rides as I always do. And I noticed a car parked in the bike lane. And when I do this, I usually go up to the driver and inform them that it's a hazard, it's a danger. In this case, I didn't see the driver around, but I saw an officer nearby. And so I walked up to the officer and I said, "Do you know whose vehicle that is? Could you ask them to move?" And it turned out it was the officer's personal vehicle. So I asked him to please move his car. It wasn't an emergency. He was looking over a photo shoot or something. And I pointed to a parking spot across the street. And I said, "Could you please move your car? There's a parking spot right across the street." And he deferred for a bit. And then he said, "I'll do it later." And I insisted, and I said, "I'll wait right here." And after about a minute, he got very upset and he got very angry with me and said things like, "You know, you have nothing better to do with your time. Why are you messing with me?" Those are not exact quotes, but there's a video of the incident. And it was as if I had gone up to him and told him that his shoes were not sufficiently shiny, or he had an air freshener hanging from his rearview window, and that was illegal. Something super trivial, right? And he didn't understand the danger that he was posing by blocking the bike lane and forcing bicyclists into oncoming traffic. So I'm bringing this up for two reasons. One, I wish he and the entire Pittsburgh Police Department would take this issue of cars parked in bike lanes seriously, because it is a constant hazard for those of us in Pittsburgh who use the bike lanes, whether you're on a bicycle, a scooter, or even wheelchair users tend to use them a lot. And the second, more important one is, in the video, it looks like he tapped his body cam before he began insulting me. I don't know if he disabled his body cam or not. I have no evidence either way, but I would appreciate an investigation to determine if he turned off his body cam before beginning his insults against me. Because if so, I think that's a much bigger issue than just being discourteous. That's all I have today. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Samii, a couple of quick questions. You mentioned October 5th. Was that 2022?
Yes, that is 2022.
And where would be the cross street on Penn Avenue that this occurred?
I believe it is 6th Street, but it might be 5th or 7th, but I'm pretty sure it's 6th.
And was the officer in uniform?
Yes.
Was his car marked or unmarked?
I did not see any markings. If it was marked, it was not visible to me.
Okay. Because you had mentioned it was his personal vehicle. I was curious if there were any kind of markings, and I think you've answered that question.
I guess it wasn't obviously a police vehicle. Whether it was department issued or his personal vehicle, I can't speak to that.
Do any members of the panel have questions for Mr. Samii?
I guess I have just one question. Were you able to look at the license plate of that car?
I do have the video of it, and I believe the license plate is visible in that video, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Because if I was just wondering if it had a municipality, license plate to it.
I could not answer that right now. I don't have the video handy. I'm sorry.
All right, that's okay.
But it was submitted as part of the evidence, so you should have access to it.
Thank you.
Green,
Mr.
Mr. Green, you have a question?
Yes, how did the matter conclude?
Uh, he got upset, and I forget how it ended, but after about a minute, I ended up biking away. He did not agree to move his car. I believe I said I was told to call 911 when cars are blocking the bike lane. So I asked him, what do I do in that situation? Do I call 911 or do I ask you? I mean, I was told to call the police, and that's what really triggered his anger. And after he got angry, I didn't want to stay in the situation anymore. And so I left.
Were you able to see identification on his uniform with respect to his name?
Yes, it was Frank Rendy.
Any other questions from members of the panel?
Just one. You said that he was rude and discourteous. His voice was raised, you say?
Yes, his voice was raised and he repeated, and the quotes I do remember are, "What's wrong with you? Seriously, what's wrong with you?" And I believe an exact quote is, "You got nothing better to do than to mess with me."
Did he use profanity at all?
I don't recall any profanity, no.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is this the first incident that you've had in this area with any other other cars parked, in this particular area?
No. So I report a lot of cars parked in the bike lane. I'm an advocate for this. And so I actually have a company that helps advocate for these things. And we've received about 700 reports of cars parked in bike lanes throughout the city, most of which are on Penn Ave. And that specific area has dozens, if not 100 reports. So it is a very common situation. And in fact, this officer cited that as a reason for why he was allowed to park there. He said delivery drivers do it all day.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the panel?
Just one more. Were his flashers on or anything with that parked car?
No, his emergency flashers were not on.
Was the car running?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have another question. You said that he was overseeing a photo shoot. What was he doing?
Yeah, there seemed to be, I don't know, actors doing maybe a scene or a photo shoot. There were cameras and things nearby, and he seemed to be the, I assume it was after hours security for overtime for this, but I can't be sure about that. But it looked like he was protecting the camera equipment of this photo shoot or this video thing.
Do you recall what time of day this occurred?
I can pull that up very briefly. Let me see. It was at 8:15 p.m.
I didn't hear you. 6:15 or 8:15?
8:15.
8:15. So since it was October 5th, it was already dark. Is that right?
Yes, it was already dark.
Any other comments or questions? Any final thoughts, Mr. Samii?
No final thoughts.
Very well. Thank you for your time and your patience. Ms. Hampton, we ready for our next witness?
Thank you.
Yes. I'm trying to find who's out there. I reached out to Miss Kamer. I only had 3 people registered, and I don't see 3 of them. I don't see 2 of them out there. There's folks that didn't register that Michelle reached out to. I did chat with one of them. She hasn't responded yet.
Do we have any of the folks online here that in the meantime?
That want to? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the lady, she does. So Miss Kamer, I'm going to allow you to speak. You have 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Catherine Kamer. And I have testimony from May 22nd, 2022, around 4 p.m. And I guess, do y'all need a second or?
No, we're good.
Okay, location of the incident was Bedford Hill Apartments in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Hills District as well. What had happened is I was there with some friends and we were celebrating the birthday party, and around 4 p.m., about 3 cop cars and a SWAT team arrived at Bedford Hills Apartments and frightened the neighborhood with their weapons drawn and had closed off the Bedford Avenue street. Around 4:30 or so, they broke down the door to the Bedford Hill Apartments that was up the street from us. There were about 10 other people that had come out around the street to watch what was unfolding. Reports were that the suspect had robbed a pizza shop or bank and then went home. And it seems a bit overblown for an entire SWAT team to show up for allegedly a single person. There was also an ambulance waiting outside of the street, and a lot of the media had come out too. There was a van for KDKA, and they were getting some of this going on the 22nd of May. Additionally, there was also children out on the street. The SWAT team, I was unable to catch the license plate of that team, but they were Bedford Hill Apartments incident. So that's all for that day.
Did you have a second incident?
No, sir. There was no other incidents that day.
Okay. Well, let me open it up to the panel to see if they have any comments or questions with respect to your report.
I have a question.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes, Ms. Kamer, you mentioned 4 o'clock, and then you said that like the next thing you mentioned was at 4:30. Is there something that transpired between 4 and 4:30?
That's when there had been shouting outside of the apartment, and several cop cars and the SWAT team had begun to show up. A lot of the neighborhood had started making quite a racket as things unfolded between that half hour. And then the media had showed up at around 4:30.
Okay, so you went when they broke the door down at 4:30. So this had built up, officers arrived, and then that occurred?
Yes, that's correct.
Other questions or comments from members of the panel? Mr. Williams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for providing this information. I'm trying to fully understand what the concern is, and so I'm going to try to not have it a closed question, but are you suggesting that given the situation, it appeared that there was more police involvement and presence than was necessary? Is that the basis of the concern, or was there actions taken at the scene that caused you to be alarmed?
That is correct, as well as the overabundance of police at the scene. There were a number of children that were playing around the streets that were close to the scene. However, no announcement was made to take the youth inside. So there could have been children in danger had this situation escalated outside.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Mr. Green?
Yes, Ms. Kamer, did you interact directly with any of the officers yourself?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from members of the panel?
The question, could you hear any words or anything from the officers? You know, loud noises, cursing, any of that kind of stuff going on by the officer?
I couldn't catch any specific verbal disagreements aside from them knocking down the door and using the battering ram to get through there.
Okay, but they didn't yell police or, you know, you couldn't hear any of that?
I think they did identify and yelled out police, and that was roughly when they had broken down the door around 4:30. So.
Thank you.
How much longer after the door was broken did this incident continue? For example, was an arrest made promptly, or did this continue to 7 o'clock at night, hypothetically?
No, it seems as if they were searching and went around and through that apartment complex for at least like another half hour or more. I remember that we were all out there watching for at least 2 hours, and they'd been searching around the other streets in the hills as well. So it went on for quite a time.
Did you learn whether or not a person was arrested?
We did not know.
Okay. Mr. Williams?
Yeah, so I have a follow-up. Can you tell us how you came about hearing or receiving information as to who they were looking for and the reason? You mentioned, I think you said it was a bank, a robbery of a bank or a bakery, maybe? I might be mistaken.
There's someone who had, I guess, some kind of equipment that had mentioned from other officers around the scene a broadcast that was looking for a suspect that had robbed this place. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Green?
Yes, you mentioned that in addition to the SWAT team, I think you said there were like 3 cop cars. Can you give us an idea of how many officers total were on the scene?
So the cop cars eventually went down the street to close down Bedford Avenue. One on like towards the UPMC building and the other towards the other end of the street, and another, I guess, went to check on the street up from Broderick. So I'd say out of the SWAT van, there was approximately 4 officers, and then the responding officers that went to close off the street.
All right. Anything further? All right. Thank you, Ms. Kamer. Ms. Hampton, you ready for your next witness?
Yes, I'm gonna allow Miss Speaks to speak. Miss Speaks, if you could, you have 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Carol Speaks, and I didn't expect to speak, but I've been having troubles with the police and my son, and I understand that you guys can have no further steps, but I just want you to know that I appreciate you looking into the incident, but I want to make sure, well, I talked to Beth and she assured me that I'm not being abandoned, and my son and my family, we're not being abandoned by you guys, that, you know, you will keep an eye, I guess. I'm lost at words because they say, well, my son was eluding them, and my son would see them coming and go the other way. That's breaking a crime. Like, who wants to work 2 jobs and coming home and see the police and know that they're going to bother you? Because that's what they've been doing. That part bothers me. And then after they stop him and they find out who he is and they search his car, and everything seems to be okay. What is it with the continuously stopping then? Every time you see Curtis, I'm starting to think that the thing used to be was the car smelled like weed. So now that doesn't work. So now it was reckless driving. He went through stop signs. I just listen, I know my kid. I know him. And he's not going to call me and say, Mom, I think they're going to Leon Fort me. That's not going to, afraid to come out of a yard. You know, and some of you may have seen my videos where I was very irate, animated, vulgar, you name it. And I want you to know that those actions were not my first actions. I spoke to Mayor Gainey. I spoke to the chief. I wrote a letter. I did a tap dance. You know what I mean? Like I even spoke to the officer and asked him what was his problem. So at that point, when I was talking to my son and he was FaceTiming me and I could see what was going on, and I was only 2 seconds away from the incident. Why I raised such a ruckus is I wanted to get people to come out and see exactly what they were trying to do. I wanted them to see that my son wasn't bothering anybody, that he wasn't doing anything. That's why I carried on the way I did, because if you just stand there and say, help, help, nobody's gonna come. But usually if you cuss and fuss and carry on, everybody wants to see what you're cussing and fussing and carrying on about. So that's how I attracted their attention, you know, and I just don't understand how you have a traffic stop when you claim you already know who the person is, with what, 6 cars and 8 officers. How does that happen? That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Speaks. Do any members of the panel have comments or questions with respect to her report?
Yes, please. Hello, Ms. Speaks. I think you inferred, but I didn't hear if you said a number. Do you know how many times your son has been pulled over or stopped by the police? And has he ever been, like, has anything happened from those? Any arrests?
No, there was no arrest. There was, the first they said that the license plate didn't match the car or something, and the car was new. It was newly bought. It wasn't a brand new car. And the paper had fell down. They found the paper and they put it back up. Then they pulled him over like maybe a little while later. I'm not sure exactly, maybe 4 or 5 times. And
Okay.
no, there was no arrest, but it's harassment. And not only do they pulling over, but I live in the Homewood section, up off of Blackador on Ferndale. and we come home up Wheeler, and sometimes they're sitting on Tyson, and when they see us come up the hill, they come behind us, or they'll be ratting, but there's nothing on my street except for me, nothing but us. And they're like, it's like they're looking for some problems. And I'm tired of it. And they have me to the point where, I told the kids that, if you see somebody beat me to death, skinning me alive, don't call the police, call an ambulance, don't call the police. I just don't want them around me or my family. I just don't.
Thank you. And this, lastly, how is your son a minor or is he an adult?
No, my son is 24.
Okay, thank you.
But he's my baby.
Always.
Yes. Hi, Aaron.
Hi. Question. You referred to a particular incident where you said there were 6 cars and 5 officers. No, 8 officers.
Yeah.
Do you recall when that specific incident occurred?
You guys have it all documented. I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
there's also something else that I thought was kind of funny. So if there's different officers calling in about Curtis driving suspiciously or reckless or whatever, why is it only the one cop, the officer, that pulls him over? Hello?
Are you saying that there's one specific officer who's
Yeah.
involved every time that he gets pulled over?
Yes. Yes. There's different officers that what I was told, different officers are saying, hey, we're setting a trap for this person, or we're following this person. But it's the same officer that was the first time he was pulled over. And it's the same officer. And he told Curtis he was going to pull him over every time he saw him. And I told him, no, you're not.
And this is all over marijuana?
Pardon me?
Is this over every time it's about marijuana?
No, there's no marijuana involved, period.
Okay.
What I said was, it used to be, they say their reason for stopping is they
Gotcha.
smelt marijuana. Now the reason is reckless driving.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
Mhm.
Did you put the officer's information in your report?
All of it's in there. Everything's in there, videos, pictures, the whole bunch.
Ms. Speaks, I want to follow up on what Dr. Gershow just asked about. Is it the same when you say they? Were you saying generally police, or are you saying it's a specific group of officers who would stop for the smell of marijuana? Now they're changed it to a different reason for the stop.
Okay, I'm saying in the past, I'm not talking about these particular officers in general. I'm saying officers used to, that would be their thing, to be able to stop you or to search your car. The car smells like marijuana. So that gave them reason to be able to stop your car. But it looks like now it's reckless driving. Because I just, for the life of me, can't understand how it is that every time they see, oh, and the other thing, they said that his tints are too dark, but still, I drive the car. I don't get pulled over. His fiance, it's the car's in her name. She doesn't get pulled over. Her brother drives. He doesn't get pulled over. And it's Curtis is always being the one that's reckless driving. Okay, well, how do you know it's Curtis in this car if you said you can't see inside this car? No, you can see in the car, you can't see in the car.
Ms. Speaks, you indicated that there were 4 or 5 times this happened.
Mhm.
Were there 4 or 5 citations for reckless driving, or were there any citations, or what?
No, well, yeah, the last time that they pulled him over, they told him that I guess they wanted me up out of there. So they told him to go ahead about his business and he would get citations. So he got about $300 worth of citations, which we're going to traffic court on them.
And that matter is still pending?
Yes.
All right.
We went the other day and it got postponed.
So there was 1 citation with multiple allegations?
No, different citations.
So the different times, different
Yes.
dates?
Yes.
Were they all in a very short period of time?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I want to say that they are, because they just got the car and it's the car that seems to be the problem. And then I saw on the news where they have been looking for a young black male in a black Kia with dark tint on it for some kind of robbery or something, and they found him. They caught him. So I don't know if did they think it was Curtis? I don't know what their whole thing was. But when I talked to the commander, I asked him, is there something that you think my son has done? Because we can't keep doing this. I'll bring him down there to you right now. Hello?
Okay, I think we have a pretty good understanding of your report. Before we move on, I'll ask, though, are there any final comments or questions from members of the council?
Excuse me, the police are all in front of my house and stuff, and I have to go see what's going on. There's always a problem, and I'm tired of it. So.
Okay,
They're saying that the person has something in his waist and they're chasing him. I live in the woods, so now I gotta go. Thank you. Bye.
thank you. Okay, Ms. Hampton, can we hear from our 4th witness?
Yes. Dr. Taylor, I'm gonna unmute you. You have 3 minutes and please identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Christine White Taylor. I do have a question before I proceed. Just to share the guidelines with me with regard to what I'm about to read that I submitted as a part of my complaint. Is it appropriate to mention the officer's name?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. This is an incident that occurred earlier in October of 2021, where an intruder was in my driveway and partially in my garage. On November 15th, which is when the trial was after the intruder was apprehended, I went to the Zone 4 police station to ask why the officer who was supposed to appear with me in court did not appear. He never showed up to court. The absence was strange because the officer had called me the prior Wednesday to the Monday we had court to remind me that I should be on time and that I should be in attendance as well at 9 a.m. on the 15th of November. The district attorney was upset because the officer did not show. I had to convince her to ask for a continuance because she thought that perhaps since the officer wasn't there with the evidence, which was a photograph that I shared with him of the intruder in my driveway and in my garage. At my protest, I did get, she did give me a continuance. My concern and dismay is around the fact that Commander Ronald Griffin expressly told me when I went to the police station that he told the officer not to appear. He also said with one of his lieutenants Sorensen, we told him not to go, and we can't tell you why. We told him not to go. Because I am a professional educator and an administrator, I assume that this was probably a human resource problem, and that in fact, for confidentiality reasons, he could not share any information about the officer. However, what was troubling to me is that Commander Griffin never at the time, and with 2 subsequent court hearings, never contacted me or attempted to let me know the first time that the officer would not be attending with me. And then the other time, since we had a continuance, that an officer would be coming in the first officer's place. Okay, I want to make sure everybody understands that. Upon my questioning, again, at the time, he walked off. He left me standing there with his lieutenant, pretty much trying to understand my next question, which was, okay, there were more than 1 officers at my home the night of the incident. Could not one of those officers acted in the absent officer's stead? No answer to that question. I asked again, why didn't I receive a call from Commander Griffin, or at least a supervisor, a sergeant, about the absence? Once again, no response. This happened twice. The commander and officers at the Zone 4 police station had knowledge of upcoming court cases and never reached out to me until I complained. Both times I ended up in Commonwealth Court by myself. So my concern really is this: having been married to a police officer, was it true that nobody could appear with me at court? I was a victim. The police officer that I was expecting had evidence that I needed to present against the perpetrator. Why the failure to navigate this situation with regard to a directive that he specifically admitted to me that he gave to the officer not to come? So there was no coverage. There was no substitute. There wasn't even an attempt to keep me from having to waste my time, or even at one point defending myself. When I got to before, I guess the court reported a person who does the scheduling or registers you once you show up for court. I'm just concerned about the fact that suppose I were not able to articulate the situation, and as a victim, showing up at a court case without the arresting officer, and then the case gets thrown out. I just think it is a situation where Commander Griffin failed to navigate it as administrator. Is there some order in the station house about deployment? How is it that you can have officers scheduled for court and they not show? Thank you.
Before I ask the panel, I do have a procedural question. Since this happened twice, was this at the level of a preliminary hearing before a magisterial district judge, or had the case already been held for court and was now pending before the Court of Common Pleas?
Magisterial, we never went to common pleas.
Do you know whether the case was dismissed or resolved at the magistrate's level, or whether it was held for court?
It was resolved at the magistrate's level.
And was that because of a lack of evidence, or because the prosecutor and the defense counsel reached an amicable disposition?
Because they reached an amicable disposition.
Okay. Members of the panel, any questions for Ms. White-Taylor? Mr. Green.
Yes, I just want to be sure that I'm getting the narrative right in my mind. Are you saying that there were 2 occasions at which this officer did not appear in court, or that there were more than 2 occasions?
Actually, there were 3 schedulings. The first one where the officer did not appear, the arresting officer did not appear. There was notification of the continuance,
Right.
notice given for a second hearing, okay, where I believe Commander Griffin was made aware that there was a court date, did not send an officer because it was canceled by the defense attorney of the perpetrator. So in both cases, I got no notification from Commander Griffin or any of his subordinates, sergeants or lieutenants. I mean, the accountability, I think, in terms of a victim going to court without the arresting officer, that's a very disquieting, frightening situation.
Were you present at the third hearing? I'm assuming that since the second one was canceled by defense counsel, that it was postponed for a third
Yes,
try.
yes, I
You-
was present.
Okay, and were any officers present?
Yes, there were 2. One of the officers, their names escaped me this evening, but they were very, very well versed in what had occurred. One officer had supposedly gotten the information about the prior hearing and obviously didn't share it. And I got that from the person who does the scheduling of court hearings. You know, it was kind of like I went over to the window and I said, hey, what happened with the notifications? And well, the police knew. You know, we sent it to officer, and I could provide it later, but I just don't have it in my notes in front of me. But I believe this whole situation hinges on the inability of Commander Griffin to adequately be a good administrator. It's a safety issue. I'm a victim. I showed up at court without the person who was supposed to protect me.
Other comments or questions from members of the panel? All right, thank you, Dr. White-Taylor.
Certainly. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Ms. Hampton, are we ready for a 5th witness?
Oh, yes, I'm gonna call Ms. Celeste. I'm gonna allow you to speak for 3 minutes. Please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Celeste Stec. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you not start counting yet? Because this is really bizarre. I actually was witness to the first speaker's incident that night in October when the cop was parked in the bike lane. I was riding my bike home from the gym. I saw the whole thing. This is so bizarre that I'm in here. There was no blinkers on and there was no identifying anything going on in that car. I'm a total witness. If he's still here, I can vouch for everything that he said. He was extremely polite. The officer seemed really abrasive, unreceptive to the fact that he was doing something wrong, and he felt like he was above the law, is how I perceived the whole thing. And now I can move on to my own situation if you'd like. But it's so weird that I saw that whole thing that night on Penn Avenue. So my situation is I am filing a citizen's review complaint against the officers who arrived to my home and arrested me. I am a professional. I am a federal employee. I teach tax law on a national level for the Internal Revenue Service, which is what I was doing when the police arrested me. I was giving a national presentation. I had hundreds of people online when the police knocked on my door regarding a situation for contractors who are working next door to me. There's 4 townhouses, we're all connected, and 2 flippers bought the townhouse next to me. They have disrupted this neighborhood. I mean, we have lots of construction over here in Lawrenceville. These 2 flippers are 25 years old. They think they own the neighborhood and they think they're the only ones working. We are all working from home. There's 10 townhouses here. Everybody here has somebody working from home. The police were called because these men pulled a 30-foot dumpster with a 90-inch gate up to demolish the townhouse next to us. And the townhouse is only 15 feet wide. There were no specifications and the permit was not posted. I drive an electric car. When the construction men knocked on my door and said they were bringing a dumpster, I said, well, how much space do you need? Because I can only pull my car so far because I have to charge it. And if it's not charged, I can't move it anywhere for anybody. So we were all in an agreement that they knew I drove an electric car. These townhouses are 15 feet wide. They brought a dumpster that looked like they were going to demolish the Taj Mahal. They also put cones 2.5 car lengths in front and behind the dumpster. So the police came the first day the dumpster was here. The contractors were dumping illegally. They told me they have 15 properties and that they were going to be working on this townhouse until December. We're in December right now. The first day that they came here, they pulled their trucks up and they had debris from another one of their properties and they were dumping illegally. The permit wasn't posted and they told me I had to move my car. I was charging it at that point. They had plenty of space to dump material into the dumpster. What he wanted me to do is to move my car so he could pull his own pickup truck there, but he didn't have work truck permits. So I called the police and I called the permit office and I said, how much space do they get beyond the dumpster? That office is in disarray. They said there's a lot of changeover since the new administration took it in the office and it's just a tough place to call and get a good answer. The woman told me, the woman who answered the phone said they only get the length of the dumpster. Didn't sound right to me either. So I called the dumpster place and I said, how much space? And they said they need 25 feet the day they're dropping it off or picking it up. My car was not in the way when they dropped it off and it wasn't never in the way when they picked it up. So the police came, they said, since you don't have the permit, we can't do anything about this. Get the permit and call us tomorrow. Tomorrow was a Thursday. That was August 19th, I believe. The police knocked on my door a second time. Mind you, I'm working also, not just these two guys working next door. I opened the door and they said, Dennis Baker, the officer said, he didn't say good afternoon, hello, we're back. They have the permit. Can we talk about this parking situation? I opened the door. He said, are you going to move your car or what? I said, no, I have an inspector coming who's going to put some specifications here. The permit that they brought, it didn't say what days, what hours, what length. This is a very busy city street. Parking is tough. And I have extra limitations because I have to charge my car. He had plenty of room to use the dumpster. These two young guys were just coming and being bullies. I got mouthy with the cops, and I'm going to say this because I don't have any secrets and I don't care. I'm a law school graduate. I work for the federal government. I teach for the government, but I have PTSD. Two men with guns with bad attitudes and two young dudes who are trying to push me around scared me. I'm not a fan of the defund the police. I use them all the time. I'm like the neighborhood watch over here. They intimidated me. Their attitude was so bad that I feared that something bad was going to go down, and it did. So I started recording them, and they do not like to be recorded. They do not like to give their name or their badge numbers when you ask. They get real mouthy. So I was recording them. These guys had cones everywhere. I mean, there's a football field across the street. There's a huge apartment complex. There's 10 townhouses. Everybody's working from home. This is a situation. The cops had a bad attitude right out of the gate, and I'm not a person who has a bad attitude. I would have done whatever the inspector came. However, the police never gave me the opportunity to say that I had an inspector coming. As I was recording them, you know, we were all walking around trying to look at what was on the permit, on the cone, on the cones that they put in front of the dumpster. There were no specifications at all. So I went to move the cone and it hit Dennis Baker on his calf. I moved it. I did not throw it. There was no intention. I'm not a violent person. I'm 60 years old. I work 10 hours a day and then I garden and that's it. And he said I assaulted him. He charged me with simple assault against a police officer. He arrested me, threw me in jail. When they threw me in jail, they told the COs down there that I don't know how to talk to police officers and to bury my paperwork. And they did. And they kept me longer than anybody else who was in the cell. The way those COs talk to inmates down there is deplorable. I've already filed a complaint against them. They taunt the inmates. They call them names. They tell them they're going to kick their butts if they see them on the street, things like that. So it was a horrible situation for me. They're lucky I didn't lose my job because I vanished in the middle of a presentation. The cops were very power mongering. They were bullies. They empowered the two guys next to me to the point where my neighbors installed, while I was in jail, blink cameras on my porch because these two construction guys, or whatever they're called, flippers or developers, whatever they're called, came onto my porch. They destroyed my property, and Sergeant Christoph gave them that permission. So we went to court. I was, arrested and charged with 2 counts of simple assault. I'm a 60-year-old woman. These are 25-year-old cops, 25-year-old flippers. They charged me with simple assault, 2 charges, resisting arrest, which I didn't resist anything. I was completely compliant, and disorderly conduct. They also did not show up for 3 court hearings, and everything was withdrawn. This has cost me thousands of dollars. It was embarrassing and humiliating. They thought their inflated police report was going to get all my neighbors to come as a witness. They were all going to come as my witness, not for the police. I am a police proponent, but nobody in my neighborhood will call the police now, and neither will I. I don't care what is going on out front. I will never call the police again. Never. They had no clue how to de-escalate this situation. They made it worse. And now every time these guys are working next door, I fear for my life. They've been on my porch, and the police empowered them. So if you have any questions, I am filing a lawsuit against the 2 guys working next to me to recover my losses.
Thank you, Ms. Celeste.
Okay, thank you.
Do any members of the panel have comments or questions?
I have a quick question. I just want to, are these, ma'am, Ms. Celeste, is this multiple incidents, or did you get arrested the same night the incident happened?
The same, it was in afternoon. It was about 12:30 in the afternoon. The guys came back and they brought their permit with them day 2. Day 1, they didn't have it. And they sent the police here 7 times while I was working. It almost felt like, well, these guys have construction to do over here, woman. Don't you know that? You just be your woman over there. It was more important that the men get their construction work done. Nobody cared that I was being interrupted and that I had 250 people waiting online for me. How embarrassing was that for me to go and have to tell my employer that I was arrested midday over a parking spot? And then the police, by the 3rd or 4th time, said, ma'am, we have violent crimes going on here. Yeah, I know that. Why are you keep coming into my house over this parking spot, which is not in their way at all? So I'm suing the city. I'm sorry. This was false arrest. I've lost thousands of dollars. They didn't show up. They didn't call. Again, like the last person spoke. They should at least say, we're going to withdraw these, call the DA. This is a waste of time for everybody. It's embarrassing and humiliating.
Other questions or comments from members of the panel?
I do have a question. You said you were charging your car. Were you in your driveway?
No, it's a city street. This is not permit parking here. It is a city public street. However, the permit that they had no specifications. So these guys were taking up all 3 spots there's 4 townhouses. Like I said, were 15 feet wide. The dumpster was 30 feet wide plus a 90-inch gate. So they had a dumpster out there plus the cones, which took up 2.5. And I have videos and pictures and everything. Took up half a city block for a little demo on a townhouse.
So you were charging on the street so that the cord,
Runs across, and I put a cone there so nobody trips over it. By the way, Lawrenceville United is an organization over here. So I called them. They called the commander at Zone 2 and said they fully supported me after they came up and they saw the situation and everything. They spoke to the commander who said, that's not a police jurisdiction type thing. That's for the inspector to handle. I had an inspector called, and they didn't allow that inspector to come here and specify how much space, what the time frame was. You can't just have an open-ended construction permit on a busy city block. We have Pee Wee football. We have a huge apartment complex, 2 hugely popular restaurants. Parking's a nightmare over here. And these guys don't live here. They're flippers. Yes.
Excuse me, yes. Thank you, Ms. Celeste. You just said that they had the police sent to you 7 times?
7.
Was that over a period of time? What was the duration like of that?
Okay, so they arrested me that day. They towed my car, put it in the pound. So that was August 18th and 19th. The first day they didn't have a permit. The cops said there was nothing they could do. The 19th they came. That's when they arrested me and towed my car. And I was parked legally. I was parked in front of their cones that they themselves placed. So that was the second day. I went into jail. They told the COs to hold me because I don't know how to speak to police officers and to bury my paperwork. And the COs reminded me of that every time they passed my cell, that until I learned how to talk to cops, I wasn't going to be let out. So they kept me there all the way until late Friday afternoon. When I went and I got my car, I put it in the same exact spot I put it every day since I've gotten that electric car to charge it, because I know how far my cord can reach. Then my car was no longer the issue. It was my plants on the sidewalk. I have potted plants. So then they started moving my plants around. Then it was the plants on my own porch. So every time they had a problem, the police came, and Sergeant Christoph told the police to come and throw all my plants away. These are plants I've had for years. They're worth thousands of dollars. They're trees. They beautify the neighborhood, and they bring the neighborhood together because some of them are apple trees. The kids come over and pick them. The Pee Wee football kids come over and pick them. And so anyway, yeah, they came, they destroyed my property. When I called the sergeant, he said he's sick of hearing about this. It's just a parking spot and they have bigger crimes to deal with. And I said, yeah, of course you do. Tell these guys to quit harassing me. And when I called police headquarters to see if I could speak to anybody who would listen to me. I said, these 2 guys, and I gave their name of the construction company next to me. I never heard of them. I'm not in construction. I don't know what they do. She said, oh, that's a huge construction company. They're probably paying the cops off. And that's exactly what a cop from the headquarters told me.
So just real quick,
Yep.
You said that the sergeant told these folks, the developers, to take your property?
Yep.
Did they tell you that, or did the officers tell you that?
The officers told me.
Okay.
And they did. They broke my pots. Some of these pots they're those huge ones where you put baby trees in. They're hundreds of dollars. All 7 times that the police came, not one of them were reasonable or looked at it from my viewpoint that I was also working. All anybody cared about was that these 2 flippers, these 2 25-year-old guys who are buying 15 properties with cash only. Now, come on. Cash only. That's, if you look at their website, these 2 25-year-old kids buying up all this property with cash only. Nobody cares about that.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned that someone informed you that this is a situation that an inspector would handle.
Yes.
And then you also said, but they would not allow the inspector. Can you give me a little bit more clarity on that? Like,
I don't. They didn't listen to me when I said that an inspector was going to come out and put some specifications and say how much space they would have. Because what the commander told Lawrenceville United, and I have an email with the quote, they don't know what's on the permits. Like, they can say move your car or whatever if you're parked illegally, but the permit situation is something that an inspector only can change. So this is considered not their jurisdiction to begin with. And I don't know if the inspector ever came because they threw me in jail in the middle of the day when I was in here minding my own business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final comments or questions for Ms. Stec? Okay, thank you very much for your report. Ms. Hampton, do you have another witness?
Hello, I was just unmuted. Am I the next witness?
I'm not sure.
I assume so since I was unmuted. So,
No, you're correct.
okay. Hello, good evening. My name is Dr. Shannon Wintruba. I had an incident that took place October 27th at approximately 9:30 in the morning. I was coming home from work, or I was coming home from dropping my daughter off. I pulled into my plan, just so kind of, my plan is one way in, one way out. I've lived in my neighborhood for 46 years, so I'm very familiar with the vehicles coming and going. Over the past several months, we've had some break-ins in vehicles, some suspicious individuals walking the neighborhood and such. So on my way home, I see a car parked down the bottom of my street. It was a black SUV. I could see that there was somebody sitting inside. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't, see much. But I could tell there was somebody sitting in the driver's seat. I kind of didn't think much of it first. I just went home. I got my shower probably about 9:30. I came out, and my mom was at the house, and she said, Shannon, why is that car sitting at the bottom of the street? It's been there since you've come home. And I said, I don't know. I said, I'll go down and look. I was getting ready to leave for the day. I said, I'll go down and see what's going on. So from my house to where the vehicle was parked, it was approximately 100 to 150 yards. When I went down the bottom of the street, my neighbor was out. He stopped me, and he said, too, very concerned, Shannon, that car's been sitting there for over an hour. He was like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll go check it out. So also, I guess I probably should tell you guys I'm a retired police officer. So that's kind of why all the neighbors come to me, and say, hey, what's going on? Can you look into this? So I drove down up next to the vehicle. I put my window down. I motioned for the individual to put his window down. And when he did, I said, hi, how are you? And he said, good. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, are you lost? And he was like, no. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yes. And I said, well, he goes, are you? And I said, no. I said, I live here. I said, you've been sitting here for a while. People are getting concerned. And he said, it's none of your business. And I said, well, it is my business. I said, I live here. And he's going on and on, very rude. I asked what he's doing up here, and he was like, I know who you are. And I'm like, okay, then who am I? And he was like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, well, if you know who I am, why aren't you going to tell me who I am then? He was like, don't worry about it. I know who you are. And I said, well, then who am I? He goes, I told you, don't worry about it. And I said, well, if you know who I am, then I'm going to come up to you and ask you what you're doing in my neighborhood. And at that time, I realized on the mirror, on the bottom of the mirror, it looked like there was a wigwag, like a police light. And I looked at him and I said, are you a cop? And he was like, yeah, are you? I said, I'm retired. And he was like, oh, I bet you are. I said, again, if you know me, then you know that I am. And I was like, what is your problem? And he was like, don't worry about it. I was like, well, who are you? He goes, you don't need to know that. And I'm like, okay. So I started to leave, and I took a picture of the license plate. Like I said, it was an unmarked car. I had a regular PA license plate on it. I called a friend of mine who lives down the road. He's a retired police officer. And I said, hey, would you know who this individual is? He says he's a cop. He was like, I don't know, I'll ride up the street with you. So I went down, picked him up. We pulled up next to the car. It was still sitting there. And at this time, the individual started screaming at me. He's like, really, Shannon, you had to go get this guy? I'm like, oh, now you want to tell me my name? And he was like, I don't know what your problem is. The guy I was with, he was like, we're just concerned. You're sitting here. You've been sitting here for a while. This is our neighborhood. We're concerned who's coming in and out. We've had a lot of car problem, people breaking into cars. He was like, and he's screaming to the point where my mother, 150 yards up the road, was on the porch hearing him screaming at me. He's like, well, I live here too, and I know who you are. He was like, you see me every day. I'm like, well, then who are you? And he was like, I'm Casey Ford. I went to high school with you. I graduated high school 25 years ago. And I'm like, okay, well, why couldn't you just tell me that? He was like, why do you're not even the police. And I was like, you're right. I told you I was retired. I said, would you like to see my credentials? And he just kept yelling at me, you're not a cop. You're not a cop. I just felt that his actions were completely inappropriate and out of line. This whole incident could have been averted if, all he had to do, if he knew me, was just say, hey, I know you. And, I live up here, and let it be. About an hour later, I got a phone call from my buddy who said that kid just called him, and apparently he is Mayor Gainey's bodyguard. And I had filed an OMI complaint prior to that, at which point when I found, and I asked him, I said, why was he acting inappropriate? And he said he didn't know. Apparently his wife called him and told him not to come home because the baby was sleeping. So he decided to park at the end of the road, and behave inappropriately. When I returned the call to OMI, I told him, I said, I guess this is going to get swept under the rug because this is Mayor Gainey's bodyguard. She assured me that it wouldn't. And at that point too, I also said, because he lives in my plan, I hope not, that I'm not going to get harassed. Very rarely do we see police officers up in our plan, maybe once every 3 months. After that incident happened, there were 3 on my street within that week. Coincidence? I don't know. But either way, being a retired police officer, being in the public safety field in criminal justice for over 26 years, his actions were completely inappropriate, and he could have handled that situation way better.
Any comments or questions for Dr. Wintruba?
Just a question for clarification. You're saying that the individual is a City of Pittsburgh police officer who serves as Mayor Gainey's bodyguard. Am I getting that right?
That is correct, Mr. Green.
Okay. I didn't know that was a police function, but thank you.
I didn't either.
How long did the ordeal take again? If you haven't,
How long was he parked there, or how long did our interaction?
the whole interaction, how long did that take?
The interaction with he and I, probably 10, 15 minutes from the time that I started with him to when I got my friend and we came back up.
And there were no other police called to the scene?
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you.
I have a clarification question. So did you suspect that he was there to watch you in the beginning, or because you later found out that he couldn't go home because the baby was sleeping? So I was confused as to why he told you he was there.
He never told me why he was there. I found that out. Apparently he somehow got my friend's phone number and called my friend and explained to him why he was there. When I, through our conversation, he and I, he never told me why he was there. He never told me. All he said was he was a police officer. And when I asked who he was, he wouldn't even tell me who he was.
Okay. So you went down because your mom, and some of the neighbors had concern about the car sitting there for a period of time.
Yeah. And it's morning time, kids getting on the school bus. It's a suspicious vehicle. So with all the activity that's been going on, it's concerning.
Did you know if his car was running or not running?
You know what? I don't know, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
So the other thing too, when I did my research for my doctorate program, I did it in the city of Pittsburgh, and I did it in Zone 5 and Zone 6. And I did find that a lot of people do like the police officers, but they feel that they're very rude and they're not friendly. And this just kind of fits in, listening to what everybody's saying, it's their actions are extremely inappropriate.
All right, any other comments or questions for Dr. Wintruba?
Yeah, this one. So at what time did you realize he was an officer?
This was after when I was, asking who he was, he kept saying he knew who I was. And I told him, then who am I? I'm like, what are you doing? It's probably several minutes into the conversation afterwards when I saw the lights on the mirror. And that's when I asked him, I said, are you a police officer? And he said, yes. Okay.
You had no indication that he was working though? Or did you?
No, he was in plain clothes.
Okay.
He had like a Kanga hat on, and I want to say maybe a t-shirt.
May I just add for the board's awareness, because a question was raised, it is customary for there to be security for the mayor, longstanding. So just for that awareness.
Anything
Yeah,
further?
but I would think that being a mayor's on the mayor's detail, you wouldn't want your police officers acting inappropriately.
My comments were not about the complaint. I was giving
Oh,
clarity.
I know,
Okay.
Mr. Williams. I was just making, another statement that, you would think that he would want the most professional officers representing him.
All right, anything further, either from or for Dr. Wintruba? Hearing none, I would thank you, Dr. Wintruba, for your report tonight.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, just to backtrack a second. Did you say that you had filed a complaint with OMI?
I did.
Okay, and has that complaint produced any results?
I've not heard. I know after I talked to her twice. Shortly after that is when somebody from the review board reached out to me, and then they sent me a letter for this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Hampton, are there other witnesses?
Yes, I have three folks left. Chris Trumpteeni, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Chris Donald J. Trumpteeni. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not here to speak about any one instance with any one police officer, but more so to speak on an issue that's coming more from administration and how the department's run. I own a number of rental properties in the city of Pittsburgh. I have interactions with Pittsburgh police probably weekly, just because of the properties and, my business in the city. I deal with great cops. I deal with exhausted cops. I deal with cops that are being held on 5 and 6, 16-hour shifts per day because they are so understaffed. I deal with cops that are responding to calls in the zones that I'm in that are unfamiliar with the streets because they're being held and forced, because they're covering overtime in those zones because there's no officers to work those zones. I'm aware that the department is probably at least 100 officers short. It could be more. I've been made aware that there are probably well over 350 officers, detectives and admin staff, command staff that do absolutely nothing when it comes to responding to calls for service that sit at headquarters all day long. I've dealt with officers, or I'm sorry, I've seen officers in broken down vehicles and in vehicles that are unsafe to be on the road, while these detectives, command staff, and admin drives brand new cars to and from headquarters, where again, they respond to no calls. So I would like to commend everybody that works for the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. And you're going to have good and bad everywhere. You're going to have people that are having bad days. I mean, you have officers that are literally getting shot at one minute and then dealing with Karens the next. So rather than go on a wild goose chase here to try to drum up complaints against officers, when everybody knows how to go and file a complaint, if they have an issue, they can go file a complaint. I don't think there's any need to fish for it. Maybe you guys could take some of your time to educate the public on, police procedure and the current state that the department is in due to the way it's run. And I mean, that pretty much is coming straight from the mayor's office. And also, I would like to comment on the fact that the department probably will not be able to hire any substantial amount of officers to respond to calls for service in the foreseeable future. I understand there's a class scheduled for 2024, but with retirement and the amount of people that will come from that class that will seek employment elsewhere after they've used the city as a training facility for those other departments, I mean, it's a joke. And so's your review board. Have a nice night.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Trumpteeni? Very well. Your next witness, Ms. Hampton.
Yes, I have a Carey poll. I will allow you to speak for 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Hey, Paul, and it's been a good 10 years since I've lived in this city. I'm actually drumming up something from 10 years ago just to make sure that things have changed, because I really did not get a satisfactory response when I filed the report then. So right about the time I left the city, I witnessed 2 Pittsburgh police officers stop and frisk 3 young men in Lincoln Leamington, basically for walking while black. They were literally just walking on the sidewalk beside Lincoln Avenue when the police pulled up, put them against a building, frisked them, publicly humiliated them, and then let them go, presumably because they hadn't done anything in the first place. Needless to say, they were pretty shaken up by the incident. I wrote a letter to the police chief at the time shortly following it and received a call from an investigator telling me that unless I could provide a badge number, they couldn't do anything, as if I would have been able to interrupt a stop and frisk without getting shot. The investigator told me there was no way he could find out who was patrolling that neighborhood on that date and that time. I work in healthcare. I can tell you exactly who is working, which unit, on which day, at which time. There's no reason the Pittsburgh Police Department shouldn't know exactly where their officers are at any given point in a day. Now, like I said, this happened 10 years ago, and hopefully with the advancement of GPS, things have changed. If it hasn't changed, if the Pittsburgh police still don't know how to track their own officers, it's problematic. Are there better ways of tracking officers now, or do people still get the kind of response that I got?
Is that a question to the panel, or is that
Yeah,
just a
please.
rhetorical question?
No, it was a question to the panel. Because like I said, I haven't been in the city, but when I saw that this was happening tonight, I'm like, I need to bring this up because I didn't get a good answer 10 years ago. And I really, really hope things have changed. And if they haven't, they need to get GPS in the cars. Has it changed? Is it the same?
I don't want to leave awkward air for her to ask those questions, but without an answer. And Ms. Carey, I'll simply say there's always technological advances. You're asking specifics about some procedure that I don't know that the board would be able to answer without its proper research. And so there are things that are always changing through the department. Accountability is one that is a constant tension there to make sure that there's appropriate accountability, and our oversight is to ensure that as well. But to get those particular details, it is commonplace for us to do the proper research to speak on that and not provide you with the wrong answer.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you very much. And thank you for having this hearing tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Pohl. Ms. Hampton, the next witness.
Yes, looks like our last speaker for the evening is Gary Pettis. Gary, I will allow you to speak for 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Yes, hello, my name is Gary Pettis. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yes.
Okay. First, my incident stems from beginning in 2018. My car was hit while parked on a night when I stayed in overnight by a neighbor. I called the police to file a police report. I filed the police report, took my dispute or my claim to my insurance company, which I ended up having to pay for the damages or deductible for my car being hit. Come to find out, a year later, I was pulled over by the Pittsburgh police in May of 2019. My car was hit in November 2018. I filed a report. And in May of 2019, I was pulled over by Pittsburgh police after a night of drinking in the south side of Pittsburgh. What I found out was that the police officer who pulled me over in May of 2019 was the same police officer that took the report for my car being hit in November of 2018. The problem with that is that there was no record of the police officer taking the report about my car being hit in November of 2018. And I found it out once I was pulled over for drinking and driving. I'm mentioning that because it's concerning to me that two wrongs don't make a right. For a police officer to pull me for drinking and driving, and prior to that, fail to turn a report for my car being hit while parked, concerns me. It concerns me because how could you pursue one offense and not care about the other? In December 2019, I pleaded guilty to drinking and driving. It's been about 3 years now. I haven't had a drink in almost 3 years. It'll be December 17th of 2022. It'll be 3 years since I had my last drink. It's because of just safety concerns. This whole incident is shaking me up. It's shaking me up that I can be pulled over for drinking and driving, and the person that pulled me over is someone else that I may have to trust in another instance where I feel like I can't trust no one after knowing that someone failed to turn a police report for something that I was a victim of, but then try to pursue criminal charges against me for another instance. For the past 3 years, while I haven't been drinking, I still like to go on the south side just to enjoy the scenery or just for entertainment. And I've just noticed like everything that's been going on. Like we've had a host of shootings in south side. I've witnessed people riding up and down Carson Street with bottles of liquor in their hand. I seen a girl riding down Carson Street with a blunt, driving her car with no lights on, not pulled over. It just makes me feel like I've been wronged or I've been treated unfairly. I mean, drinking and driving is wrong altogether, but I just feel as if there's no uniformity in law enforcement. I was told after going to alcohol counseling at Turtle Creek Valley in Southside that the police enforce drinking and driving more strictly around the Liberty Tunnel because of previous accidents where people have been injured really badly. My family owns houses throughout the city. My grandparents own houses in the north side. I live in the South Hills. I hang on Carson Street. I've seen high-speed chases Carson Street. Like I said, I've seen a woman riding up and down the street with a bottle of Crown Royal in her hand. Another woman ran with her lights off with a marijuana blunt in her hand. Why is the law only being enforced for drinking and driving or driving under the influence around the Liberty Tunnel or pertain to someone like me and not enforced everywhere, like in the north side, in the east end, in the west end? I mean, if you're going to enforce a drinking and driving law or driving under the influence, whether it's marijuana or drinking, I think it's something that needs to be more uniform throughout the city, not just targeting one area near the Liberty Tunnel or South Hills residence. I rarely see DUI checkpoints near Carson Street. There's never DUI checkpoints near Heinz Field, Casino. There's tons of drinking establishments that I feel like there's no alcohol enforcement. So I kind of feel singled out about being pulled for drinking and driving. And also what makes it even worse is that the officer who got me for drinking and driving is also the same officer who failed to turn in a report pertaining to my car being hit while parked. So that's my complaint today.
Thank you, Mr. Pettis. Do any members of the panel have any comments or questions for him? All right. Again, hearing no comments or questions, I'll thank Mr. Pettis for his report. Ms. Hampton, did I hear that Mr. Pettis was the last witness for tonight?
He was, but Nancy Rizzo she raised her hand a few minutes ago, so I'll allow her to speak. Ms. Rizzo, you have three minutes, and please identify yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Nancy Rizzo. I had an incident, my husband, my daughter, and myself on October 13th in the Brookline neighborhood. My daughter and her boyfriend were fighting. My daughter was very drunk, and she suffers from mental illness. Her boyfriend had called me and asked me to come up to her home because they were fighting so bad. And they have 2 children. So my husband and I arrived on the scene. And in the meantime of us making the bend to her home, he called and said, I left, I took the children. I said, okay. He said, I'm taking them to your house. So when we arrived at my daughter's home, she's in her front yard, screaming 911 help. So, cause she's drunk. And so apparently someone in the neighborhood called the police department and, cause there was a woman screaming 911. She lives at 1323. Now the cop pulls up. Now my husband is, talking to her, taking her back into the house as he's walking towards her as she's walking backwards, like just saying like, Tyler did this, Tyler did whatever, telling her about what her boyfriend did. He was getting her back in the house. Well, the cop parks at the 1300 block. He comes flying down. My husband's back to him, never announces himself, just jumps on my husband. My husband's 60 years old, 127 pounds. He's a 25-year-old cop. Jumps on my husband, throws him to the ground. Okay. So in the meantime, I'm just keep pushing. He has no backup. So I just keep pushing my daughter back because like I said, she is drunk, but she just keeps saying, get the F off my dad, get the F off my dad. What are you doing this to my dad for? She didn't know why the cop was doing this to her dad. Okay. So about 5 to 6 minutes later, a backup arrives. This officer gets out and it was just, I don't know what he was doing. And then, so at this point, I
started video.
Well, yeah. So
the officer was striking me, trying to.
The cop was striking my husband. While my husband was on the ground, he threw his box. He threw, the recorder. I seen the black little thing in the yard. So then with this, now I start recording. My feet were up by the cop's head. Okay, I mean my husband's head because the cop's on top of him, and I'm just telling my husband, stop resisting, not because I thought he was resisting, because I didn't. I was just like, just put your hands together. Like, why is this cop doing this to him? So as I start recording, this cop comes and he throws me. The other officer throws me. I land on the ground. Now I'm disabled. I tell him I'm disabled this time. And I suffer now from a spinal compression fracture from this officer pushing me. I was never arrested. He never questioned me. He just pushed me because I was recording. Now he went and got his dog. And then at this point,
Another officer intervened.
Yeah. This time now a bunch of cops had come. But at this time, now, they arrested my husband for resisting arrest, and they arrested my daughter for public drunkenness, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. And even at this point, now that they had them both in the car, I went up to the officer. I said, sir, you were wrong. You came on my husband. You never announced who you were. His back was to you. You could have just handcuffed him and detained him to find out what the story is. You never, ever asked even what the story was. And I stood there and I was waiting for him to say, what happened here, ma'am? Because they still, at this point, his report states that when he pulled up, he ran down thinking that my husband was the cause of why the woman, my daughter, was screaming 911, which is understandable. But why are you just diving on someone and not detain someone or do something and say, what's going on here? We're her parents. We are doing what parents do. We were trying to diffuse the situation and get her back in the home because she was drunk. So long story short, that I never got arrested after I got thrown. So what was his point of throwing me? There was no point of throwing me. And now I'm suffering with a spinal contraction fracture. And now then, you call lawyers to represent you for a personal injury, and they say they don't want to go against the police. They don't want to go against the police. They don't want to go against the police. So that's where we're at. And so now the hearing is got postponed because now we did hire a lawyer.
After I was in handcuffs, the other officer grabbed the handcuffs with both hands and tightened them up extremely when I was not resisting at all, and grabbed my fingers and broke the joint of my fingers. Like he was like raking at my fingers. I don't know if that's something they do or whatever, but I was definitely not resisting. And they basically roughed me up like it was unbelievable.
And then, but neither one of them had to go to jail. They took them both to the hospital because the ambulance.
Excuse me a second. Excuse me. I don't mean to sound rude. This is a court reporter. I am making a record of this proceeding, and I need to have one person speak at a time. And I also need I need you to identify yourself. The man who was speaking previously, could you please tell me your name?
I'm Robert Rizzo, and I'm the one who was involved.
Thank you for that. Please speak just one at a time. Thank you. Okay,
sorry. Obviously we still get upset, even though it was 2 months ago. We get very upset about it. So that's basically it at this point. We're just waiting now for the hearing. But the ambulance thought that my husband needed to be seen. So he never, he got arrested, but he just didn't have to go to jail. So then when I called Don Zone 6, because they said, you have to turn yourself in on Monday. They said, okay. So I called on Sunday night, and an officer answered, and she was on the scene. And I said, hi, I said, my husband was involved in a, police brutality. And she goes, oh, was this on Oak Ridge Street? I go, yeah. And so she knew exactly where it was. And I said, my husband was mistreated. She said, well, you don't have to turn yourself in. He'll get a summons in the mail. So that's where we're at. We're just waiting now for the hearing. But I just didn't think, well, first off, I think he violated my husband's civil rights, number one. And number two, he threw me, and there was absolutely no reason to throw me at all. The second cop, none whatsoever. And I was never arrested. He just threw me and never even said, ma'am, he never even, and he wrote it in the report that the officer threw me. I mean, he does say it in the report that the officer threw me.
All right. Do any members of the panel have any questions for Ms. Rizzo? All right. Hearing none, I want to thank Ms. Rizzo and her husband for their comments tonight.
Here's a hand up.
Mr. Green. Mr. Green, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I love the technology. Okay, maybe I missed this, but when did this happen?
October 13th.
Of 2022?
Yes.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, you had mentioned, Ms. Rizzo, that there was the initial officer made no statements or said nothing when he approached your husband. Is that accurate?
No.
You said? And what about pertaining to you? Had anybody said anything to you prior to them engaging you?
He said, step back. And as he was saying, step back, he just pushed me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pittenger, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Ms. Rizzo, do we have your contact information?
Yes, you do. I just didn't pre-register. I didn't know if it was good if I did it before the hearing. Yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted to be sure we could follow up with you. Thank
Okay,
you. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Ms. Pittenger. Ms. Hampton, are there any other witnesses or people who wish to make comment tonight?
There are no other witnesses, but Gary Pettis has put his hand back up. He spoke earlier.
Mr. Pettis, are you still there?
So I'm going to allow you. Yep. He should be able to speak now.
Yes, I'm still here. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to speak today, just like out of an attempt to try to make things better. I'm aware that the Citizens Police Review Board is like looking into some incidents where there were some situations that could have been prevented, like a funeral where there's a shooting where there could have been officers who were supposed to be there at that time. And I'm just concerned because I feel like, you know, my car was hit in an instance and there was nothing done. There was no police report turned in. And it's starting to look like it could be something that's systemic. What I've seen is that you're looking to see if some of these issues are systemic. So I wanted to speak for that instance. I'm noticing that sometimes there are some scenarios where the police enforce the law or they show up to do their job. And there's other scenarios where they don't enforce the law or don't show up to do their job. So I only spoke not to bash the police, but only just out of concerns for safety and an attempt to try to do something that could help others in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Pettis. Okay. Madam Chair, this concludes the portion of the public hearing where public comment has been solicited and received. We've had 10 people who have given remarks, 11 if you include Mr. Rizzo, supplementing the comments of Nancy Rizzo. Is there anything, Madam Chair, that you wish to add at this point?
I just want to ask any other members of my colleagues if you want to say anything. If you do, we'll do it at this time.
Just that I appreciate the folks coming to share their testimony with us today.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank everybody on behalf of the board, and a report will follow this early next year. But again, thank you everybody, all 11 of you who came this evening to let us hear from you. We truly appreciate it. The board will convene in about 5 minutes. So if we could take a 5-minute break, and then we will proceed with our monthly meeting.
This public hearing is concluded.
Thank you. Yes.
Recording has stopped.
Thank you.
I just paused it just so you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Everybody need to do a quick break?
Yes, I do.
All right. We'll convene in about 5 minutes.
Mr. Ward or Miss Chair Grosero, this is the court reporter. I don't usually I'm not usually here for your monthly meeting, so I'm assuming was I just here for that public comment?
That's correct.
Okay, and do you want this transcribed, I take it?
I believe we do. Thank you.
Okay.
And what is your name, sir?
This is Dylan Durana with Network Deposition Services.
Okay. How do you spell your last name, Dylan?
The last name is D-I capital R-E-N-N-A.
Nice to hear from you again.
Nice to hear from you too, sir, and everybody. Thank you for your hard work and your service to the city, and have a good, nice holiday season.
You too, sir. Thank you so much for your service tonight.
Thank you.
Be safe now.
And we're on mute, right? So I'm gonna run to the restroom very quickly.
I think it's still streaming, but we are paused.
Okay.
Just give me a heads up.
All right, when everybody comes back on, then we could just start
Okay.
with you have the agenda, right?
I will pop it up. I can't unpause it with the
Gotcha.
agenda.
No
Yep.
worries.
Yep.
I'm not getting any warmer. Oh shit, you have to have the caterer tonight, huh? Did you text Lori? Just tell her I'm still on my meeting. It's gonna be for an hour or so. So hungry. Mary Jo, Mr. Williams had to leave to go to another event. He extends his apologies for having to leave.
Oh, okay.
Right back up.
So everybody, well, we'll get to that at the quorum. Call for quorum. Because I think we have everybody now except for Mr. Williams, right? It's so hard with just one screen. It's like I'm getting my other screen up. I'm getting another monitor.
Well, do you have everybody on it? You can change the view.
Well, I need to look at some stuff I have here.
Are we ready?
I got you.
I'm ready. Everybody, colleagues?
It's okay to unpause? Yay?
I'm assuming everybody ready?
Everybody's muted, so.
I'm good.
Okay. I'm gonna unpause it, Dr. Garcia.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm calling to order at whatever time it is right now at 7:53. The monthly meeting of the Citizens Police Review Board. We do have quorum. Oh boy, hold on. Hold on. I cannot get my notes. Can you take that off for 1 second, please? The agenda?
Yep.
Thank you. I have all my notes. I told you I need another screen. Anyway, so at our at our October 25th public meeting, the board decided to conduct an election of the chair and vice chair of the Citizens Police Review Board. So at that meeting, we asked everybody to what their wishes were. And so at that public, we decided that at this meeting, we would receive nominations for the chair and vice chair. And so this evening, we would like to see if there are any nominations. And I know Executive Director Pittenger, you had asked at the next meeting that if people had an interest that, they could contact you or me as the chair. I didn't receive any interest at that point. I'll call for nominations in a minute, but have you heard?
The only, excuse me, the only interest expressed was a nomination of you to serve as the chair, Dr.
Okay.
Gershio.
Okay, so at this point, let's ask if there's any people that would like to be nominated or serve as the chair of the Citizens Police Review Board. Alrighty, hearing none. We will announce I guess I'm the person. Is that, I don't think we have to vote if there's no other person. Is that correct, Mr. Ward?
Are you nominating yourself?
Yes.
And then would you accept the nomination that you just made in which you nominated yourself?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations in addition to Dr. Gershio? There are no additional nominations being made for the position of chair of the board other than Dr. Gershio. At this point, it makes sense to close the nominations for that particular position. Dr. Gershio, do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Nomination should be closed. Okay.
Correct.
Because there's only one nomination for the position of chair, namely you, I think we can expect acclamation as opposed to a vote. So I'm asking the board whether they approve of the election of Dr. Gershio as chair by acclamation. And
Yes.
it appears to be unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and I hope to serve you as a board well during this period of time. The next we have to do is nominate a vice chair. And again, members can nominate one another, nominate themselves, or perhaps I can nominate somebody. I think that's by the bylaws, I can do that. So do we have any interest in the vice chair position?
Mr. Green has his hand up.
Oh, super, because you know what, Mr. Green, I was going to ask you if you'd be, and I'm
Well,
sorry.
actually, I was raising my hand to nominate Mr. Williams, but I see that he's not with us now. Did he leave us for the evening?
He had to, yes, he gives his apologies, but he had to go to another meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay. I mean,
Well,
I don't know if it's prudent or wise or even ethical to nominate someone, much less elect them in their absence. So I don't know. Mr. Ward, can you give us guidance on that?
Well, I don't know if it's a matter of ethics, but it is a matter of, I think, professional courtesy.
Yeah.
It's sort of the idea of everyone taking one step backwards when you're asking for a volunteer. I did note that Ms. Brown had her hand up. I'm not sure if I read that correctly.
Yes, sir, you did. I wanted to respectfully nominate colleague Mr. Raymond Robinson.
Okay, we have one nomination at this point, Mr. Robinson. Are there other nominations? Dr. Garcia, you hinted at one, but I don't
Yes.
know if.
Well, Mr. Green, would you have interest in serving as vice chair? And you might be muted. I got a couple, I have you minimized, so I can't see.
I'm not muted. I'm just taking a pause.
You're allowed.
Pregnant pause. Okay. I would accept the position if elected or chosen. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations? At this point, there are two. One for Mr. Robinson, one for Mr. Green. Mr. Green hinted at one for Mr. Williams, but I think in view of what has transpired in the past few minutes, that appears to be moot. But I will ask, are there other nominations? And if so, it might be a situation where you can actually vote for the vice chair at the next meeting if there's any discomfort about proceeding with 4 individuals as opposed to the full membership of the board.
And folks, we can either do this, like Mr. Ward said, either at our January meeting, if we would like to do that, or we could do, Beth, isn't there some sort of online voting thing that gives a tally pretty quickly?
Yes.
There is an online app that will allow for secret balloting and with, anonymity to the individuals voting, but certification of the legitimacy of the vote. Yes.
Okay. So that's another option that we can use.
If you wanted to do it that way, Mr. Ward, you check me on this, okay? But I think you could probably set a date for a period of time during which a vote would be taken, and everybody would be given their notice, their ID to go into this app and cast their vote. And then at the January meeting, the results could be presented. It would be a time-limited period. All members would be notified. So you would have 7 people aware of it. They could vote within a week or a 2-week period of time, after which the results would be, they would be certified, and you would be able to announce it in January at January's meeting. I think it's the January the 24th.
Yeah, all that makes sense to me. The only issue that remains open is whether the nomination should be closed tonight or whether the absent members should be given an opportunity, knowing that it's not coalescing around one candidate, to either nominate themselves or someone else. So, on the other hand, they're not here. So the question is, do we proceed with the 2 nominations, or, and I'm only addressing this because of Mr. Green's comments, or do we not close the nominations until the other 3 board members can be heard? I'll defer to the panel.
So we have Dr. Darby, we have Mr. Williams, and who else do we have?
Ms. McClellan.
Ms. McClellan, that's right. Sure. So,
I say leave the nominations open,
okay.
So that our fellow board members can weigh in.
Okay. Or Beth, does that allow for a write-in that's online?
Yes.
Because would that, Mr. Ward, would that serve as, you know, a good principle way of doing this, is that they would know that they can nominate themselves, but then, yeah, then everybody else wouldn't know if they would needed to vote, right?
Yeah,
So that
I
would be
think at some point, and if the members tonight agree to delegate this responsibility to Ms. Bittinger, I think that'd be fine. But I think at some point, the full membership should be advised of what's transpired so far, that there are 2 nominations on the floor, and that by a date and time certain, any nominations that need to be made in addition to them, or in the event that either of the 2 nominees have a change of heart, that is the time to do it. I mean, right now, I recognize it's 5 after 8, and we had, for the purposes of some context, a lengthy public hearing tonight. So I'm for one grateful that the 4 remaining members were able to attend, but it is somewhat unusual as we press into the evening. So bottom line, I agree with Mr. Green that it makes sense to keep the nominations open. I also think that we should set a fixed date and time for anyone to either nominate themselves, nominate someone else, or change their present status. Thereafter, I think the secret polling and voting can occur. Does that make sense, Beth?
And I would appreciate if the members tonight could set that drop dead date for the nominations. And we can notify all the other members. Yes.
Yeah. Well, today is the what? 6th, correct? What if we gave everybody till January 31st? And so that we could start the new year.
December 31st?
Yes.
Are you thinking December 31st?
Yes. Did I say something? I'm sorry. 31st
January.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
December 31st.
New Year's Eve.
Very confused.
Yeah.
I would do it sooner, Dr. Gershio. I mean, you have some momentum now.
Okay.
You know, people are either going to want to do it or not want to do it. And it would make sense to me to at least get the nominations closed sooner than New Year's Eve. Because, you know,
I'm sorry, I was thinking the vote by New Year's Eve. I'm sorry.
Now we have to close the nominations first.
So what if we did that, gave everybody what, 10 days to 2 weeks? And that would get us 14 days from today would be the 20th, correct?
I don't think anybody would need that much time.
Okay. What do you
How
think?
about the 16th? And it's just a virtual, it's just an electronic vote, correct? Or are we discussing a meeting?
It's not even a vote at this point.
I'm sorry?
Right? It's not even talking about the vote. We're just saying.
You're just closing it.
Yeah, I think that could be done. Is there a reason we couldn't do that in a week?
Yeah.
Okay,
Like the 13th.
that's fine. Beth, does that give your office enough time to get communication out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Works for me.
And that's just to close the nominations.
Correct.
So that'd be close of business by December 13th. And then Beth or her staff will notify the board members as to the slate of nominees by that time, so that there can be an election electronically, probably immediately thereafter.
Right. Okay.
And chunk it up a little bit.
And then how much time would we give folks to respond to that online voting mechanism? Another week?
Yes, if you want to complete this, the 13th, you're a week out from Christmas, but it's
Right.
something you're either going to do right away or you're not. It's not something you have to go think about. So if we were to close the nominations on the 13th, notify everybody on no later than, for say the 15th. And that the voting could open on the 18th and close on the on the 23rd, which is that Friday. That's 1 week. And I don't imagine, there's only 7 of you, excuse me. So when you open that email, you're probably going to just boom, boom, and be done with it. So a week is probably more time than we need, but it does allow for the fact that it's a holiday season and there can be a lot of other interesting things for people to be doing. And then announce that outcome, that whenever you'd like. We're not bound to doing it at the January meeting. That was just a matter of convenience if we were running into January for the vote.
Well, my thoughts were January, we have, it's the new year, we got everything settled, people know their role, and we just roll on. So that was my thought. But if everybody feels that we need to wait until closer to the board meeting to conduct the vote, I'm not sure we need to do that. If everybody gets the notice saying that this is the process, they get that within the next day or so. This is the process. Keep your eye open between now and you have to have your vote in by the 23rd. Does that make sense?
It does.
Sounds good to me.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Saul.
Yep.
All right, Steph, if we could put the agenda up then, I am now ready for that. Thank you. All righty. So if you could.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So we can scroll down.
We do approval for the minutes?
That's correct. So everybody received their minutes from the last meeting. Are there any changes, additions, deletions to those minutes?
I saw none.
Okay. Hearing none, the minutes have been approved. The only report I have is to thank everybody, and that I will do my best to represent this board at meetings and other events that are required by the position. Thanks so much. Beth, your executive report. You might be on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that, folks. In the interest of time, I will endeavor to be brief. There's been a lot of interest today on our patterns of complaints in terms of how many we have this year. Up year to date is 220, whereas in previous years we've exceeded that number, but we've seen a pattern of these complaints coming down. If we look back at the 4 years previously, in 2021, we had received 227. So we may be close to it in the same range this year. But in 2020, we had received 286. In 2019, 253. And in 2018, 273. So it says something. I'm not quite sure we would understand precisely what that is, but I think we also notice that there's been a difference in the nature of the complaints we've been receiving, whereas in the past, especially in the early years of the board, the complaints were very heavily related to use of force and warrantless activities and things that were of more grievous nature. Today, we're seeing the majority of our complaints, on an average about 60% of our complaints, being demeanor related, unbecoming conduct, the things you heard about tonight at your public hearing. So it's something is shifting, something's happening. But I thought you might have an interest in that quick snapshot of the complaint intake through today for 2022. We've been participating in a working group that continues to review and discuss and think about and pending legislation at City Council related to stop and frisk. That group has been on and off for the last couple of years. We did meet since our last meeting one time and have been sharing ideas. We're nowhere near to a conclusion to that. Legislation remains pending. It is also notable that it is again sponsored by Reverend Burgess, who has been very progressive on legislation dealing with those kinds of police enforcement activities that tend to have poor outcomes, such as traffic stops, stop and frisk, warrantless searches, etc. We have not yet selected a candidate for appointment to an investigator position. Our goal was to have that accomplished by the end of this year. It's probably going to roll into the beginning of next year. It will, definitely. It's not a probability. It will. The community liaison position is being dressed up and formalized. We have the tasks and the description of the expected activities that position will fulfill for the board. So that's still not even been posted. Again, that'll be first quarter for next year. And we had our budget hearing today, and we are in good shape. We're in very good shape, and we had a nice discussion with City Council about the work you do, and the current situation with the Bureau of Police. The fact that they have a shortage, that they are returning to 8-hour shifts in 2023, so as to recoup what they lost when they went to 10-hour shifts. The recruitment problem that they have, which is resulting in a reduction of qualification for educational requirements. Discussion briefly about that and the value of the 60 college credit requirement. The inquiry we opened into those incidents that we were curious about why officers didn't show up where they were supposed to be or said they were where they weren't, and the relationship of that to the capacity of our police supervisory personnel. We requested from the Bureau the curricula and the material supporting that curricula for leadership and ethical preparation training for supervisors, pre-service in a new rank, including sergeants and lieutenants and commanders. And what do they do to prepare them? And then how is that reinforced over time? Equivalent of what in service do you do to refresh and reinforce the expectations of those leadership positions? That request was sent to the Department of Law to be reviewed as to whether or not we were allowed to see it. Acting Chief Stan Grecki at his budget hearing last week did confirm that there is a preparation period of a week to 2 weeks for sergeants and lieutenants being promoted. So we know that something does indeed happen. So in order to give us the ability to be informed when we're assessing in the course of that other inquiry, we need to know what that is. So hopefully we'll have an answer. I did reach out. I think it was yesterday. I sent an email to the law department liaison for the police who has that request because it was a reasonable period of time had elapsed. And I have not yet. I didn't hear back today. And I believe that that'll do tonight, unless you have questions. I mean, I could go on for a long time, but I think those are the major points that would be important for you to be aware of tonight. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, just a quick comment. Just going back to your first point about the number of intakes. Can't help but notice that 2020 you had the 280. That's the height of the pandemic, George Floyd, so to the protest all over the country, and we've seen a decline since then, which, I mean, short window, but it is of note, and I'm curious to see what that looks like maybe going into next year, probably a longer look, but just knowing that what happened at that same time is of note.
I think you're right, Mr. Robinson. It's explanatory as to why there was a bump because of the extra activity that occurred during that summer.
I agree. Right. Any other questions for Executive Director Pittenger?
Just one other quick comment. I know we're way over here tonight, but part of the Citizens Police Academy that we were at, we did have at the opportunity we met with the training folks at the training academy. I did have a question that was I asked that the officer that did not want to answer in front of everybody, but he did answer me privately. It was specifically around that. It was like who gets promoted, and like obviously you can have the best training, but you need supervisors to enforce procedures and whatnot. And he kind of gave me a non-answer, like basically said, acknowledging that, yeah, you do need to know who you're making supervisors, who's getting promoted, or is it people who are supportive of new policies and procedures, or folks who have not necessarily been promoted. Now, he didn't say one way or the other, but he did acknowledge that he didn't want to say something in front of the larger group to that end. But I'm curious to see what comes of your request, and hopefully the responses to share what they have on that.
I think, Mr. Robinson, something else I mentioned to City Council today, and this is not to be negative or critical or bash the Bureau of Police, because they don't warrant that. They don't deserve that. They're under a lot of stress. They have a lot of internal commotion going on, and that kind of organizational disarray, or that chaos within an organization. And that doesn't mean they're out of control. I'm just saying that organizationally, they've been going through a lot of changes over the last 10 years. And that takes a toll. And as organizational changes occur, like maturity related, leadership related, all of those things, you have the other commonplace, regular, every day, every month, every year kind of things that come into play. Who's being promoted? Who are we recruiting? Who's retiring? And changes also with case law that changes the way they practice enforcement, changes with regard to best practices in the industry, things that interfere with a direction they may have been going, say in accreditation. Right now, their accreditation is on hold because of the traffic stop, changes in traffic stop practices. The ordinance says do one thing, it's well intended. Accreditation says, no, you can't tell them not to do this. And so the accreditation ends up, in a bay, it's hanging there. So there are so many unpredictable variables that influence this organization. The most prominent being the stability, or it's not stability. I'm not saying they're unstable, but it's that stability and reliance upon the environment that you can trust to be somewhat consistent and continuous. So I did share that observation with City Council today, but from a purely observational perspective, not pointing a finger at any one person or two or three people, but just acknowledging that I think the Bureau is undergoing, and has been for some time, for almost the last 10 years, that has been very, very significant to their internal culture and still having to adapt to the external culture. So what that officer confided in you, yeah, and maybe that kind of thing will change as well as they evolve.
I'm glad you guys are enjoying the academy. Did you finish up, or do you still have some more classes to go, sessions?
One more class, right? And then graduation.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. I hope you guys, I really enjoyed it. I'm hoping you guys are having a good time with it.
Pretty
Time consuming.
interesting. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a perspective that it makes you stop and think, right? It's like, wow. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ms. Pittenger, for the report. Unfinished business is that we have our 2023 meeting calendar. So I'm just for note, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but June 24th at 6, you're going to see a date here. That was tonight's agenda. I mean, tonight's meeting, but our next one is the 24th. All right. Any other unfinished business, colleagues? Any new business? Alrighty, hearing none, let's do case review. Alrighty, so we have 4 for full investigation, and that's number 200-22 ED, 197-22. Whoops, where's my screen? There. 181-22 and 175-22. Do I hear a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is 3 for a 30-day extension of the full investigation, and those cases are 171-22, 170-22, and 157-22. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Then we have one that has unfounded, and that is case number 134-22. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
did we get that? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We have 4 for suspension. Number 143-22, number 123-22, number 122, and case 020-22. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry, guys. Any discussion? So sorry. Any discussion? Now we'll take the vote. In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. I believe that is the end of our, I don't think there's any more continuing suspensions, right? Just, we have some to follow. All righty.
Is there?
No, I think that's it. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. We have 10 for continued suspension. Number 063-22, 03522, 00122 ED, 171-21, 16021 ED, 138-21, 252-20. Got a few more after that. 190, 87-19 and 87-18 ED. And I believe that is 10 of them. Yes. 191-19 and yes, that's it. 87-18 ED. Do I hear a motion?
I move.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion?
I did briefly, and I don't know if this is appropriate for this, but just I had a question about the number of cases that we have here, and how does that impact the staff's workload? Like, are these cases that they're actively having to do something, or is it waiting? Are they waiting for something external?
I think they're waiting.
So, the ones that I'm looking at right now, some are waiting for witnesses, investigator trying to determine the disciplinary action. So I think they're all in some sort of investigatory, and I guess your question is, does it seem overwhelmed and they're just not able to get to them? Is that kind of the question?
Not so much that, but I mean, going to that point, like, does that impact their caseloads? Because I know we just had 4 additional go into suspension. And I'm just curious, like, is this the norm? Is there a ebb and flow to that? Because some of these go back several years.
Mm-hmm.
And Madam Chair, may I respond?
Please.
Mr. Robinson, those cases, if you look at what is noted as to why, what are we waiting on, that kind of thing. Periodically, the investigator does check on their cases. They have an idea, they have a file where they know when a milestone in the case may be coming up that will assist them, or if there's somebody's incarcerated and they're inaccessible to us, if it's something like that. They know their caseload. These suspensions are not the result of them being heavy on cases. These are just assuring that you are aware, because the board handles all dispositions, and these are alive in our case, in our case list. So we just want you to be aware of where they stand. They're not being put aside because there's something else is taking precedence over it. Like, for example, 250, 220. I believe that case we're waiting for subject officer statements. And that's a practical problem that we have to work out. And with this administration, hopefully Mr. Ward and I will be able to meet with the city solicitor and discuss options. We have not had a chance to do that. But waiting for subject officer statements is a very valid reason for a case to sit and wait. But that means we're waiting on OMI to complete their work, because we can't obtain those subject officer statements until OMI has completed its investigation. So it's tracking lots of different events in the life of a case, and many of those variables dependent upon other sources.
Thank you, Ms. Pinger. And I guess I got that part, because I can read I understand why each one is. I was just more concerned thinking about the staff, and are these a drag on the staff's time and resources? Or I think I heard you say, they've got a way to manage them. They know when they have things coming up. It was more my concern is just for the staff. Having run a child protective service organization with caseloads that are overwhelming, on cases you can't do anything about. It's not like you have to do something. It's just they're just there. And I guess that was some of my framework was, is this something that the staff, and some of them are on here, like, is that something that's a burden, or is it just the course of the work?
Well, I'm sure some of them feel that some of them are burdensome, but you have a crack staff. Your investigators are remarkably resilient. They're committed, and they do their work in a very professional manner. And they never complain. They do care about the people who are behind those cases. So, and they will bend over backwards to try to get the officer side of the story without having to resort to the formal processes like issuing the subpoena, getting the statement, waiting for the statement, and that sort of thing. They're a very, very good group of people. We're very fortunate.
Okay.
Thank you for recognizing them.
And the other is that we will have another investigator probably before March of the process. I know the process could be a little bit cumbersome on hiring, but we're hoping by March, maybe.
Okay.
Yes, and again, it's not unlike our friends over there in the Bureau of Police, you know, attracting people to do this work and being qualified to do the work and being comfortable that they can be entrusted with the work. So yes, it's underway. Hopefully the first quarter will bring the investigator and shortly thereafter, the community liaison.
Thank you. Alrighty, I think.
Still need to vote on this one.
Sorry.
We still needed to, hadn't voted yet because I.
Oh,
brought up-
okay, sorry about that. All right, so on the 10 cases, do I have a motion?
We already had the motion in
We
second.
already have a motion.
Oh,
and a
sorry.
second.
Did we have discussion? We have discussion. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry,
Aye.
guys, it's 8:30 and our
I'm
12.
sorry, that was me.
I'm sorry.
That's your bedtime.
Exactly. All right, the agenda, Stephanie. I think the last thing on the agenda is that our next meeting is June 24th.
January.
January 4th, 2023 at 6 p.m. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Madam, I wanted to follow up on something I neglected to do earlier, and that was our discussion about the back in, I believe it was October, when we had invited Mayor Gainey to come and discuss with you the policy change related to the 60 college credits, and he was unable to come because he had a conflict with a community meeting related to making the city more accessible for people with disabilities. So I did not pursue an invitation for this month because of your public hearing for tonight. Is that something you would like to extend to in the new year for the January or February meeting?
I would like that.
An invitation to the mayor to discuss potential policy changes.
Definitely.
I would like for us to do that as soon as possible, as soon as his schedule will allow.
Yeah, because there's not going to be a new class until what now?
I'm not sure when it's coming on. That they're hoping to have two classes, one which would be for lateral transfers, basically for veteran officers coming in to the city, that they don't have to go through the entire 120 process, and the second being a group of fresh recruits.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. As soon as possible would be wonderful.
We will extend an invitation to the mayor or his designee to join you at your January meeting, and in the alternative, your February meeting, to have an open, an open non-adversarial discussion about the current state of the Bureau of Police, because we're also awaiting the selection of a chief of police who will have quite a job in front of him or her.
Mhm.
So it might be a good time so that we can get an understanding of the direction the Bureau of Police will be encouraged to pursue.
We have a hand up, Beth.
Where?
It's Lisa Frank. She's in the audience.
Okay.
Okay, can you bring Lisa up and
Sure.
bring her up, please?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hey, good evening. I'm Lisa Frank. I'm the mayor's chief operating and administrative officer. I'm on the call actually with the public safety director, Lee Schmidt. He and I and the mayor had this meeting in our calendars for tonight. We've all were invited. We sent the mayor home after a few hours. So we're happy to come back and have this discussion at the next meeting, but I think it would be courteous to remember that we've been invited and call on us to speak when we come to the meeting. And if at all possible, could we be a little earlier on the agenda? I've been here for a long time, as has Director Schmidt, as was the mayor for a bit. So I'll just enter that. We've been here. We learned from the hearing and enjoyed your board proceedings, and we're happy to come and talk about the policy, but wouldn't like to do it 3 times. So it's late. Let's say good night, and thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
May
Thanks
I
for-
respond?
Sure.
Ms. Frank, my deepest apologies. I do not recall us receiving any confirmation for tonight's meeting, and I totally, I own it. I am unaware of that, and my deepest apologies. Though I am glad that you were here, I will go back and check my. I just am totally befuddled. I apologize profusely. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience.
As long as I've got you, just a couple of things that both the director and I noted. The Bureau is accredited. They worked with the accrediting agency to get that accreditation despite the change in policies, and the new 2 police classes will both be in 2023, one very early in the year and one beginning in the middle of the year, not 2024.
Okay. And they're both new recruits?
First class is already officers who've been officers elsewhere who are going to come and do a short class and learn how to be Pittsburgh police officers. The new recruits will begin in the middle of the year.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go. Good night.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night. And again, my sincerest apologies. I don't understand how that happened, but I am very, very sorry for the inconvenience.
All right.
Thank you both for coming.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
We still have an
I will look
audience.
into it.
We still have an
I will look
audience. KDKA is on, WTAE. There's still a few folks in the audience.
All right. Thank you.
Just giving you guys a heads up.
Thank you. So again, our sincere apologies to the group, but I'm glad they were here. They were able to hear from the constituency and their concerns around police conduct.
Absolutely. And I apologize to the board. This certainly reflects on you, and it's certainly unintentional. And I'll figure out what happened.
Thank you. Ready. So just again, a reminder, the last item on the agenda is January 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And we may need to invite those folks back, and we'll figure that out over the next month. But again, I want to thank everybody and wish everybody the happiest of holiday, and see you in 2023. Is I can make a motion that we end this meeting. So do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, sir. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, folks.